Did you get an escort, did you?
Apparently I've got a tail light that's not working.
Did you tell him you're on your way to council?
I chose not to play that card.
I told
I
him.
would have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second meeting of the Auburn City Council for December. I'd like to officially call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda, after we call the meeting to order, is to talk about agenda approval and any additions to the agenda. Otherwise, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Okay, Trina Paul. Moving second to move forward with the agenda as presented. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're squared away with Zoom and everything else, Chief?
Should be good.
Got Maggie on there?
Yep.
Okay, good. Communications, this is an open part of the meeting with citizens who are here to speak to anything that's not on the agenda. Otherwise, save your comments until when they do come up on the agenda. We do have several public hearings and open up the agenda time and Mr.
Mike.
Montgomery.
Mike, can you push that button on that platform there?
First of all,
Mike, can you push the button on the microphone there? Should be green. Good to go. Thank you.
buttons.
There you go.
First of all, at the last council meeting, Mr. Delancey got a little carried away, and in some way, I felt that he drugged me into his conversation. His meaning was, with helping the veterans was a good message. I don't think it was delivered very well, okay? So on my behalf and his, I apologize to anybody that got their feather wrinkled, but just remember, this is life, and it's not a bowl of cherry for anybody, right? One thing I'd like to add is, there's many things that we could do that don't cost a lot of money, that would make this a more veterans-friendly town, as a way to put it, okay? But what you may not know is that I do a lot of speaking around the state for Veterans Day, for holidays, 4th of July, and I've never had anybody walk away from one of my talks with dry eyes. So, but I'm not going to go that far, okay? I don't want to really cry. But I want to pass along one of the messages that I give when I give a talk. It's 9 points that I wish you to think about, points to ponder, okay? First point is, it is a soldier or a veteran, not the preacher, who has given you the freedom of religion. It is the soldier or the veteran, not the reporter, that has given you freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, that has given you the freedom of speech. And it's the soldier or veteran, not the campus organizer, that has given you the freedom to assemble. And it's the soldier or the veteran, not the lawyer, that has given you a right to free trial, fair trial. And it's the soldier or the veteran, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. It's the soldier or veteran who salutes the flag. It is the soldier or the veteran who serves under the flag. And it is the soldier or the veteran who is buried with the flag. Just think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Any speakers here in the public comment section? Otherwise, we'll move on to the consent agenda where we've got 4 items, mostly appointments and minutes. Any questions or move forward on that?
I'd move approval of the December 4th City Council meeting minutes.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm assuming everything
it's
is
the consent.
Oh, the,
full consent agenda.
wait, Mitchell, and
Yeah.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Paul.
I'll second.
Paul Scott. Move second to move forward with the consent agenda. One item I would mention probably is that we still have 1 spot open on planning and zoning and 1 on board of adjustment. Is that correct, ladies? I think so. If anybody knows anybody that's interested in those spots, otherwise we'll have to put ads in the paper again and try to get that. But those are the 2 openings. We're ready to move forward on the voting here. All in favor of the motion, please say aye on the consent agenda.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the public hearing. Proposed amendment number 8 from Alberta Urban Renewal, and officially opens the public hearing, I think, at this point. Chris, you have anything to add from Your comments?
No, so this is amendment number 8, there'll be an amendment number 9 coming fairly soon. The urban renewal area has been in place for a very long time. The amendment itself is to identify when we're going to do individual projects and how much we're going to spend. So in this instance, we have an urban renewal, low to moderate income housing complex, and there's potential to spend just under 1.2 million, so we have to identify that in the plan amendment. And for those that are wondering why, it's so that we can use TIF funding, low to moderate income TIF funding to help repay any monies that we were to use for this project.
Anybody here from the public seeking to speak to that? This is for the area,
Would be Glen
South.
Street
Extension
extended, so
east.
just to the east of the new dentist office, the car wash.
30 units, LMI housing.
Any action here on E, or do we wait until G?
No, you'll close public hearing and then you go to G2.
Last call for any information or any questions about that public hearing. Otherwise, I'll officially close the public hearing on amendment number 8, and we'll move now to G2. Resolution.
I move approval of resolution 12-18-2023B, determining an area of the city to be an economic development blighted area, and that the rehabilitation, conservation, redevelopment, development, or combination thereof of such area is necessary in the interest of public health, safety, or welfare. The residents of the city designating such area as appropriate for urban renewal projects and adopting the amendment number 8 to the Mount Vernon Urban Renewal Plan.
Paul's made the motion, is there a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
Craig. One item, and I don't know if it's in the latest version we got, but on page 28, it referenced 40 units, which we were originally at. Did you catch that change in the second?
Yeah,
Or is that-
it didn't, as long as it just references the units, it doesn't matter like on the unit number. It was actually, it started at 50, then went to 45, and now it's down to 30. And these are senior style, low to moderate income units, so they're age restricted.
Yeah. And income restricted, right?
Well, yeah, so you'd have to qualify under those LMI rules.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor to approve the second resolution, G2, with Paul and Craig moving that. If there are no other questions or any other comments, Chris? Otherwise, we'll put it to a roll call vote.
Turner,
Marcia?
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
And that is it for voting. Move on to the second public hearing. Proposed resolution to voluntarily annex property to the city of Mount Vernon. I'll officially open that part of the public hearing. This is the land northwest, basically.
So north on Springville Road, a portion of property that is owned by Troy Lawaji would be at the west, I want to say 60 feet of his property, and then the north, so just under 160 acres, so there's an entire section just north of Mr. Lawaji's that is being annexed in. However, there's some small portions of that quarter section that are being carved out simply because they are not owned by that individual.
So the 160 is bounded on the south by Abbey Creek, roughly?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. This is a 100% voluntary annexation. I've had people ask me about utilities, and the nice part about a voluntary annexation is we can wait until we know what is being proposed. At this point, we'll be setting some public hearing dates and bringing these properties. So Troy Troy Lowagi's property will come in as ag, and then the property to the north would come in as business park.
Still officially open for the public hearing here. Does anybody from the public have any comments on that transaction? If not, then I'll officially close the public hearing on G2, and move to, F2, E2, and move to G4 for action here.
I would move to approve Resolution 1218-2023D, approving the voluntary annexation of property into the city of Mount Vernon city limits.
Thank you, Greg.
And I would second that, although in the
Yeah,
agenda, it
in
looks
the-
like resolution.
In the packet, it has the wrong, it has E instead of E,
Okay.
so that change has been made.
Okay, with that note, I would second.
Let's move to second to move forward with resolution G4. This has been about at least a year and a half in process.
Year and a half.
So, haven't built anything yet or done anything yet, but it's taking this long to get to this point. This is another roll call vote. If you are ready, Marcia.
Rose,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
That resolution passes. Moving on to, we have no ordinances. We've got resolution in G1, approving a 2080 with City of West Branch.
So I've been discussing, Doug and I have been discussing this with the council for the last couple of weeks. City of West Branch has seen catastrophic losses in their public safety police officer workforce. They have reached out to surrounding communities and asked for volunteers to fill in shifts, to continue to have a police presence. I asked Chief Shannon to poll our officers to see if anybody was willing to volunteer. It would be on their time, so it doesn't interfere with our patrol. And there were, the cleanest way to do this is by signing a 2080 with West Branch. They will be our officers when they are there. They will use our equipment. West Branch will then pay us an hourly rate to cover those expenses plus mileage, use of the vehicles, things of that nature. But in order to not have to go through some processes to you do a license in both cities, it's just easier to do it this way. And I don't know at this point, honestly, how many shifts we'll fill in. Mount Vernon, Cedar County, they've reached out to Wilton,
Tipton.
Johnson County, Tipton, so it'll be overtime for our officers, so I'm sure there'll be a few that will want to sign up, but I'm comfortable with this. It's kind of a short term. Hopefully they'll start the hiring process for themselves internally, and as the need dwindles, then we will obviously stop offering, so.
I know Adam, city manager at West Branch, has it on his agenda tonight in his city council meeting. Does he expect any issues on their end?
No, I hate to say it, I mean, they're at the point of desperation. They lose their chief, Heather lost.
The end of the month.
End of the month, they'll be down to one officer. So,
So a couple of comments, if I may, Chief and others to respond to. First of all, if Chief and Chris, you're for this, I'm going to be for this. When I first heard of this a month ago, little red flags came up, and really you've alleviated, I'd say 99% of those. I would just say, first of all, none of our officers will ever be forced to take a shift. And if Chief ever gets the feeling that their performance in Mount Vernon is suffering as a result of them taking on additional shifts because they've chosen to do this,
Correct.
obviously we'll nip that in the bud and take care of that. It looks like liability has been covered 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 in the contract itself. So the city of Mount Vernon and our officers are not going to be liable if something unpredictable happens in Cedar County or West Branch.
We're truly supplementing their coverage. I spoke with Cedar County Sheriff Warren Wethington about this as well and made sure everybody's on the same page with where it's at. His officers, they're supplementing coverage at 80 hours a month, I believe, also. So he was glad to see that we were going to be able to assist, because that'll, when West Branch isn't there, Cedar County is the default. And so he was gonna, he was worried about some of that coverage as well. So we have a great working relationship with Cedar County just because we're border them already. So I think the working aspects of it will be very clean. We'll most likely be driving their cars, but using all of our equipment, as Chris said, unless it's the K-9 officer that's covering, and then they'll reimburse mileage for his vehicle because it's obviously equipped with the K-9 abilities from there. So should have everything covered from our perspective. It is 100% voluntary on the officer's part. We're not decreasing patrol coverage in the cities, that was the first line item I had, is we're not impacting anything here. If that occurs, then we can't assist. So
I just want to go on record.
you bet.
And I'm just gonna ask it so that it's asked. I assume the attorneys have looked at this
Yes.
entire project. Okay.
So you got a new copy of
Yeah.
the 2080 with some minor tweaks to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lori's really gifted, but I didn't think Lori read it.
The fact that I had to read
I was an attorney.
I had to read the coverage and the indemnity about 7 times to figure out who was there for it and where to buy it and all that, so I assumed attorneys had a pass.
And the attorney, the city attorney for Mount Vernon has done work in West Branch, so,
Did they feel okay about this? I assume?
yes. Again, this is probably the cleanest and safest way to operate such an agreement. Like you, when we were first approached, I think my comment to Chief Shannon was, "You're not gonna believe this." But it was presented in a slightly different manner. So it wasn't until we held a Zoom meeting with representatives from West Branch that we kind of got a better handle, and chiefs had an opportunity to talk to chiefs from other departments. So officer safety, that's what we stated to them. We will not put our officers in harm's way to come down there. So that was one of the things that we, criteria-wise, is if we feel like our officers are being jeopardized, then we would just.
I think the biggest viewpoint from our perspective was we're looking at this as a mutual aid request for somebody who's in need of assistance. Much like we've done with Cedar Rapids during the floods, Parkersburg during the tornado, different aspects from that. We deployed to those communities when they were, and that's how it's really being treated. It's not a Mount Vernon-Lisbon 2080 where it's a long-term relationship type situation from that standpoint. So knowing that we're there in a short time, hopefully 6 months or less, that's why we were a little more willing to entertain the thought too.
Someday we may need
Absolutely.
support
Right.
in some endeavor, so.
Absolutely.
Well, in today's labor market in general, and then in the law enforcement area, you may see this a little more frequently.
Yeah.
And obviously over our years together, we've always had 2080 agreements with the county, and
Yep.
as you said, Lisbon and Cedar Rapids. I do appreciate the due diligence that was done. It should give everyone a good sense that we're doing it the right way.
Opportunity to be a good neighbor to nearby community that's in a jam. I think we need to start with a motion
I
on
would
this.
move approval of resolution 12-18-2023A, approving 2080 agreed contractual agreement for supplemental law enforcement services between the city of West Branch, Iowa, and Mount Vernon.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. Moved and seconded to move forward with a resolution with 2080 with West Branch, and that is a roll call vote. If you are ready, Marcia.
Turler,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
That resolution passes, and Chief, pass on thanks to your officers who do pick up shifts there, and
Will
volunteer
do.
for that. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Maybe update us how it's going.
Absolutely.
After a month or so.
absolutely.
Thanks.
I think we're to G3. Fixing a date for a meeting. Proposal to reallocate certain unspent proceeds to general obligation capital loan fund, etc. G3. Is this where Maggie's weighing in, or do you start? Chris?
No, this is just a set date at this point.
Oh, okay, yeah, fixing a date, yep.
This is to reallocate monies from our 2022 bond issuance from the 4th Street, 5th Avenue water main project to the police station renovation.
Yep.
I did have a question to ask on where were the overages and why are we doing this? And I wanted to go back to the very first meeting when we talked about these bond issuance and remind everybody that I made the statement at that meeting that the water main project would be the project that I would hold on to in case there were cost overruns in the other projects that were borrowed for. So there's approximately $55,000 worth of change orders, which on a $1.2 million project isn't bad. And then there were some increases in equipment, some equipment cost. And so it just makes a lot more sense to go ahead and take monies that are sitting there and transfer those over. We have other funds that we can look at in the future. It just puts that project off. What is the risk? The risk is that's one area where we fix water main breaks at least one a year. So staff will push hard for that project to be put back on the front burner. But until then, we need to make this transfer.
So we would set the date for what, first
January
meeting in
2nd.
January? Unless there's other questions or concerns, I would move approval of resolution 12/18/2023C, setting the date for the reallocation of the 4th Street and 5th Ave water main project monies to the January 2nd city council meeting.
Thank you, Scott.
I'll second that.
Great. Move to second to move forward with the date, saying January 2nd. Chief, does that cost cover the garage door? Is that everything covered?
We'll take that out of normal budget operation for the repair on that.
Do you have a plan?
Yep.
This is a time for a resolution vote.
Engel,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Turler,
Yes.
That resolution passes. Moving to G5, amending the purchasing and procurement policy. This is Maggie.
No. So Maggie towards
We're
the
trying to
end.
get you in here, Mike.
These next three resolutions are because of the generator grant that we got for the LBC.
And does this relate to J6?
Yes. So, EasyCog, East Central Iowa Council of Governments, it's just easier to say EasyCog, is going to administer that grant application. But this is the $100,000 that the city received to place a generator at the LBC, kind of post-derecho grant application. So, because CDBG is a federal fund, we have to follow their rules. And we just did this 2 years ago when we were seeking FEMA reimbursement. And they've since struck out everything that they told us to adopt 2 years ago and have us re-adopting this. So outside of these CDBG funds, we'll never use this portion of the policy, but we have to have it. So those three, we don't really have a choice. We have to adopt them while we are receiving those funds.
So we have to go through these one at a time?
You will have to take a vote individually on each of them.
On the first resolution, is that a motion?
So just to clarify and ask the stupid question, the blue stuff that is crossed out is what we're striking, the red stuff not crossed out is what we're adopting.
Correct.
In that case, I would move approval of resolution 12-18-2023E.
Thank you, Scott. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Great. Any further questions or comments, Chris?
No.
Otherwise, we're ready to move forward on that resolution. Marcia?
Turler,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
That resolution passes. Continuing in that vein, on G6, CBDG.
If there aren't any questions, I would move to approve Resolution 7-18-2023F, approving the CDDG required policy on the prohibition of the use of excess force.
Thank you, Craig.
Second.
Paul. Seconded to move forward on G6. I'd like to ask our local law enforcement, are you offended by the fact that there has to be a separate resolution for this?
I was surprised to see it there, to a certain degree. We've also seen, part of the restructuring of law enforcement use of force and the attention that it gets. Offensive, no, I think, we're fortunate too in Midwest, in Iowa, that, our officers are also against excessive use of force. And I think the term there is excessive. The reality is we have to use force at some times, from that standpoint, and we take pride in trying to work through that, so.
And the reality is, to accept these funds, we have to have a
Yep.
resolution for
Correct.
this particular policy.
I think the frustration is that we already have
Yeah.
a policy in place. We pay a company to make sure that all of our policies are up to date. So it gets frustrating that we have to adopt a specific policy just to get grant funding, but this has kind of been the
Those are the
way,
rules.
way the world is post-COVID, so.
Okay. Got a resolution on the floor, G6. No further questions, Marcia? Ready to call roll.
Turler,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
And that resolution G6 passes. Moving on to G7, adopting the required policies for CDBG funding. That's the same vein.
I'd move approval of Resolution 12-18-2023G, adopting the required policies for CDBG funding.
Thank you, Paul.
Second.
Tongue twister.
Any further comments to add, Chris?
No.
Okay. That's the last one in that CDBG area. We're ready to call the roll.
Engel,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Turler,
Yes.
And that resolution passes. Area mayoral proclamation, there's nothing here, but Mr. Andreessen asked me about human trafficking proclamation, and I did not remember that, but I did get something on that literally today in January, and we'll be acting on that. And I think I forwarded it on to you, Marcia, to get that on, and Chief probably knows about it as well. So there will be one in our second meeting in January. And what do you think about that? If that's going to be on Martin Luther King Day or not? There will be one coming. Moving to motion for approval, J1, consideration of claims list. Last one that was sent out this afternoon, I believe. Any questions?
I would move to approve the claims list.
Thank you, Craig. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Scott. Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion to approve the claims list as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Discussion and consideration of the application number 12, police department renovations. Council action is needed.
That's the application in the amount of $71,008.22. The balance to finish the project plus retaining is $141,660. So it's almost there.
Yep, we know how it's all going to get paid for, we just voted on that, so.
Any more?
I would move to approve discussion and consideration of pay application number 12 for police department renovations.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Craig and Scott. Alden, any more concrete poured out there yet?
Wednesday,
I'm sorry, your building, I'm sorry.
Wednesday.
Okay, good. Well, off topic there. Pay application number 12 on the police department. Motion on the floor. Are we ready to vote on that? It's a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. J3. Discussion and consideration of setting a public hearing date for an ordinance submitting a comprehensive plan and official zoning for all lots within the Stoner Plaza 10th edition to the city of Mount Vernon from C2 general commercial to MU mixed use development. This is the, sorry, plan.
January 2nd.
Yep.
And so this is the land that we just voted on.
For the urban renewal amendment, yes.
Correct. In that case, I would move approval of setting the public hearing date for the rezoning of the Stoner Plaza 10th edition for the first city council meeting, January 2nd of 2024.
Thank you, Scott. Second?
Second.
Hey, Paul. Moving second to move forward on item J3. Ready to vote on that one? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That's another project that's been working on about 2 or 3 years, so that gets moving on that. Public hearing date to amend the Mount Vernon Comprehensive Plan, establish a zoning classification. J4.
So this isn't actually a rezoning per se, because it's not in the city limits, we can't call it a rezoning. So, I've never seen this before, but Mount Vernon is known to do that. Within our ordinance, it says that there's an annexation ordinance that will establish the zoning districts for areas coming into the city. 99% of the other communities in Iowa will just do that with the resolution doing the annexation, but
So as part of the annexation resolution, we would say we're annexing parcel A, and
we're
it's
going
gonna be
make it-
zoned
yeah,
whatever.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Um,
We're separating them out.
So this is how it's kind of backwards, that you had to approve the annexation application. Now you can set a date to establish the zoning district out there, and that'll be adopted by ordinance.
Well, with that said, I would move approval of setting the public hearing date for the zoning establishment, the voluntary annexation of the Lodging property for our January 2nd, 2024 meeting.
Said Scott. Is there a second?
Second that.
Thank you. Great. City Hall, got any questions or comments about this?
One,
Okay.
we had one landowner ask, but that was about it.
One note I would make on that is, and Chris, I guess the question would be, in the notes, it's, we're looking to maybe fast track that one.
Yes, so as long as there's 4 council members that will be available at the next meeting, just because this annexation's been waiting in the wings, we would probably ask, if there's no controversy and there's 4 in favor, that we would waive rules and do that all in one meeting.
Sure. To your point, it's not a rezoning
No.
necessarily, and, okay.
It's an established,
Right.
Yeah.
establishing of the zone.
Yep, okay.
Good question. A good comment about asking about doing all the meetings at one time.
Yes.
Got a motion on the floor, J4, set a public hearing date of January 2nd. No other questions? Ready to vote on that? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. J5, consideration of Parks and Rec Board recommendations to into an MOU with the Monarch Research Project. I think this was Councilman
So,
Rose's comment from a month ago.
yeah,
Yeah, so the council asked Park and Rec Board to review some of the literature that the Monarch Research Project submitted to the city. Park and Rec Board has, and they are seeking permission to move forward with a memorandum of agreement with Monarch Research Project. The agreement, sample agreement that I put in the packet is one that they have with the city of Cedar Rapids. So they would come in and help us talk about ordinances, what we would have to do for.
the
for
Monarch
maintenance.
Research Project?
Yes.
Clark,
Correct. And I know there's been a lot that has changed in the prairie planting realm, but given the fact that we could potentially have acres of property that would be transformed into prairie or some sort of pollinary planting, I would echo that sentiment and allow Park and Rec to kind of work with the Monarch Research Project on a memorandum and bring that at a later date. I just wanted to get your blessing before I let them start having that conversation.
But Ed, I've had comments from various city staff being supportive of this. I think Chief Shannon pointed out an area that he was looking for north of the police station. Eldon, I think, mentioned some areas too. Jane DeWitt was talking about this, that she saw it, or knows that it's coming, so, and she's supportive of it and so on. So that's good to hear that even before it's enacted here, that there's staff support for it. And it's, I'm making a topic of my sustainability meeting in the first week of January, so that's an easy win for me.
Well,
Thank you all.
for Tom and the city
I know,
of
in that
Vernon,
case, I mean-
I would move to approve the Park and Rec Board recommendation to move forward with the Monarch Research Project at the, I guess, the introductory phase.
Thank you, Craig.
Second.
And Paul, discovery phase, yes.
I would just like to make one point. So often our volunteers on our boards are asked to tackle things that they aren't necessarily experts in. And I think that we need to let them know that they can reach out to other organizations that are experts. And I think this is an excellent example of that. Gather the information, use the experts, and then do their job then from there to make a recommendation that makes sense to them. And I appreciate them doing that.
And I would note as well that Tom has, on a couple of occasions, given me some credit for this, and I was a conduit. Gretchen Robinson, the pet nanny, brought this idea of a pollinator, returning our unused city property into pollinator zones to us, and I just forwarded an email. I mean, so it, but point being, when there are ideas that are presented with a foundation, with data and with information to back them, this is where things can go. So thanks to her and to Parks and Rec.
This has the potential to save money in the long run as well. We don't have to mow these areas on a weekly basis, and that will save on staffing.
Another example of the power of positive relationships. You mentioned one through Gretchen, but this also came up in a parallel concurrently with Graham Carl with Parks and Rec, new council member, or new person on that board. He's an attorney, came up through one of his partners, and they had a connection to Clark McLeod, and there's funding available for this too. So having the right people on those volunteer commissions helps, and they're very engaged, and they're looking a little bit out of their, the lawyer job for those, in that particular case. But you really brought something to the table there. I think we've got a motion on the floor, that we have not voted on it yet. Yeah. Ready to vote on it? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one's on ISICOG.
So, in reference to all of the policies that were adopted, EasyCog would, they would be our conduit for these funds, for reporting, things of that nature. So $3,000 on a $100,000 grant is pretty good.
No further
Make
questions.
sure we don't run afoul of the CDBG
Yes.
funds.
Chris is on the board of ISICOG, I think he probably should, yeah.
That one's great.
Um,
I would move approval of the EasyCog contract for the CDBG funds in the amount of $3,000.
Thank you, Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Paul. Moving second to move forward on J6. Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. J7. Session.
Chris's memo.
Yes.
Good. So now we're to Maggie.
Yeah, thank you for your patience.
Um,
Bear with us.
So I'm gonna, first, this is the report that was sent separately. This is the report that Spirit Financial puts together for the city, excuse me, annually. For those in the audience, this represents the city's debt and our usage of TIF. Shows how many notes that we have at any one time and what our payment reschedule is. So it also outlines what our statutory debt limit is, which is 5% of our overall value. And we use that as a tool to talk about what I'm going to talk about in this memo as it relates to project funding in the future. Maggie's probably getting annoyed with talking to me over the course of the last 2 weeks because our projects have seemingly changed over and over again. So, if the council remembers, we were set to actually pay off about $1.19 million this year in debt and interest. And we were set to bring on $1.19 million to extend a road and pay for a portion of the LMI housing from our LMI funds. Before I get into the weeds, those funds can only be used for LMI projects. It's not as if we can take them and use them somewhere else. So it specifically sits there until we find an LMI project that qualifies to spend those dollars. So this project opens a big door for us. With that being said, the $395,000 that you had approved for CHI, in my conversations with both the bond attorney and Maggie, would be considered taxable. So there's a litmus test that Spear and Allers will go through. And one of the major components of that test is whether or not there's considered a clawback. So the clawback is if they don't move forward with the project, we don't give them $395,000. So if we were to borrow those funds prior to that, we would have to make that statement as part of the borrowing, which in turn would make them taxable. It just makes it more expensive. It's not bad, it's just more expensive. So talking to Maggie and Allers, we've decided to not borrow the $395,000. We can borrow that internally and not have to worry about taxable value. We already have $120-some thousand in our LMI fund cash. So, so that's reduced that portion of the borrowing altogether. So we take $400,000 out. Now we're down to the $750,000 for the road construction, which is only a portion of it. The estimates for the road construction are about $1.2 million.
And this is all part of that, the
Correct.
CHI?
So this would
lens?
extend Glen
Glen.
Street about between 600 and 700 feet to the east, and then it would make a connection to Business 30 across from the Catholic Church. So there would be another access point into that small commercial area. So then we start to look at, bond, when we go out to borrow, when the city goes out to borrow, it's expensive to go through this process. We tend to get rated. So there's a cost associated with a bond rating, and then there's a cost associated with issuing the bonds. Correct me if I'm wrong, Maggie, but on the 1.19, everything, it was between 30 and 40,000 out the door.
It's a pretty substantial rating fee, and what a rating does is it brings more investors to the table, right? You've been rated in the past. If you aren't rated, the investors will start to say, well, what are they trying to hide? And it's just, we're not trying to hide anything, it's just a small issuance of debt, right? So do we really want to justify the rating cost, this and that? So we would recommend that it be rated. So again, on small issuance, it's a pretty substantial amount that adds to the cost of issuance. So those are things that we weigh when having that conversation. So I think that Chris will allude to kind of what our thoughts are.
And then maybe depending on the rating, that will affect then not only the number of borrowers that, or lenders that show up, but then the rates that they
Right.
offer us on that funding, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just want to remind everybody, in Iowa, we have what investors call really good paper. And that just means that we have an unlimited debt service levy. So although House File 718 made some adjustments to your general fund, things like that, it does not touch the debt service levy. You are still able, as a council, to set a debt service levy based on the general obligation debt that you owe to these investors. And you may be paying it, and you show in our report that you're paying it sometimes with different funds, right? You may be using TIP, you may be using water, sewer, things like that that we borrowed for that are being repaid. But ultimately, you have a very good, you're a good investment in the state of Iowa. So we'll say that it does bring more investors. It can adjust the rate you're probably seeing on the rate adjustment side from a rating standpoint, 10 to 15 basis points. But 10 to 15 basis points when rates are at 4 and 5% is different than when rates are at 2%. And we just don't have 2% rates anymore. We have seen rates really calm down because the Federal Reserve at the last 2 meetings now has not raised rates. And so that's calms the market, and we feel going forward, rates will continue to kind of remain steady, not really creep up, or they can even just come off a little bit. We're not anticipating you're going to get 2% rates anytime soon, but we could get around that 3.5% to 4.5% rate. We think that would be fantastic in the market, and we foresee that going into the new calendar year.
So we have that 750, and then we've also been talking about the water meter project. And we were set to, try not to confuse everybody. So there's two major pathways when we borrow debt. We have revenue debt, which is tied to water, sewer, any sort of enterprise fund that we charge you a monthly service fee for. And then we have general obligation debt, that is tied specifically to some sort of, basically tied to your taxes, whether or not we use taxes to pay for that debt or not, it can be backed by that. So when they purchase our bonds, they look at that and go, push comes to shove, they're not going to probably walk away from these because they are obligated to increase their taxes in order to pay for that. So the nice part about revenue debt is it does not go against your debt capacity. So when we're trying to stack projects on one another, I tend to move the projects that could be paid with some form of revenue debt off so that we save our capacity. With that, depending on the revenue debt that we utilize, can come additional requirements. So as I was talking to the engineer regarding our water meter replacement project, SRF, which is the state revolving fund, they're federal dollars that we borrow from that the state operates, has a slightly better interest rate. I think it's at 2.84% right now. But you must pay prevailing wage and a few other things. So it gives you somewhat of a true interest rate, more like 3.5% to 4%. So it's pretty close to what the geo market is doing right at the moment. They also require to leave your specifications open so more people have an opportunity to submit. My issue with that when it comes to water meters is there are two well-known, well-respected water meter companies in the state of Iowa that operate in a majority of the cities, and then there are a few that aren't. If we were going to replace between 12 and 1,300 meters, so that the city does not have to do this again in the next 15 to 20 years, then I would like to make sure that we can tighten those requirements. In order to do that, now we have to move them away from SRF and back into a general obligation debt, and then we can, much like if we were going to go and buy a backhoe, Eldon could go, it has to meet all of the requirements of this model of John Deere. And then there's some battling back and forth. Companies will come in and try and say, and then the companies are like, no, it does not, and this is why. So now we have, and that was projected to be 750,000 as well, but I can tell you that's going to be $1 million. The goal with the water meter change out too is that we would get constant reads from the water tower, and we wouldn't go a month. Our citizens wouldn't have to go a month of leaky toilets and things like that before they found out they had a $500 bill. So there's a lot of perks to going.
And we save man hours.
Yeah,
That kind of stuff.
absolutely. We save approximately a week's worth of time of one individual to read all the meters in the community. So now we're at
Per
about,
month.
yeah, per month, about 1.8 million. So I'm also looking at the pool. I've stated this on many occasions over the course of the last 3 months that the recommendation to replace the existing pool at 12 to 13 million is not going to happen in at least 7 to 10 years. And by that, because our bonding capacity is $16.7 million. So if we would have to not borrow anything for a number of years in order to make sure that we had 12 or 13 million that we could go and borrow for. And so knowing that we're going to have to look at moving that project out, our existing pool, I get this date out, it's 1959 or 56. It's old. Needs renovations in order to make it another 10 years. So the expectation, and we should get numbers after the first of the year, is that that project would be anywhere from $1 million to $2.5 million. So now I'm looking at and talking to Maggie, I'm like, I would just prefer to do one borrowing, pay issuance costs one time, and include all the projects that you're looking at, including with this one borrow. Now, one of the caveats to that, in order not to increase taxes for a borrowing of that size, is the use of tax increment financing. You have historically set kind of a self-limitation of 750,000 is where you would stay within. Long story short, we have $4 million that we could use of TIF funding on a given year. The more that we take, the more our own general fund, the school's general fund get affected. So we try to keep that fairly stagnant and avoid all of the entities trying to compensate for large jumps and significant drops. So, but that's self-imposed. I'm going to tell you that if we go this route with the larger borrowing and include the pool and certain other items, that is probably going to be closer to $1 million to $1.2 million
From TIF?
For repayment, for TIF. Now, the good news is,
You've got it.
we have it, and it doesn't increase the tax rate.
Is that 4 million included in the borrowing scenarios that you put together?
Yeah, so if you look at,
That's the only thing, I thought your memo was good, I thought you answered the questions good, your reprisal here is good. That was the only thing on number 6 of your question, the answer to the questions. I just wasn't sure if that was included in that almost 17 million overall.
so right now, I apologize, I'm not trying to bore everybody, but we have this fiscal year, we had our debt limit was $16,854,582. The current outstanding debt for this fiscal year was $9,127 plus another $219,000 in rebates for a total of $9.3 million. Our debt payment in fiscal year '24 was going to be $1.19 million. So that left the remaining debt capacity of $8.698 million.
Does that include that 4 million?
No. So that that's a snapshot from where we're at today. About 51%. You have another self-imposed rule to lop off 20% of that debt capacity in order to keep in reserve for emergency purposes. Why? Because when derecho happens, we have to pay for all of that up front, and then just like we did, we got our FEMA reimbursement 3 years later. So we keep that 20%. That's not a number that I would have you adjust ever. So when you take that 20% off, it leaves you about $5.3 million. Knowing full well that even if you borrow those funds this year, you're going to pay another $1.2 million off next year. So we're pretty aggressive at paying off our debt as well. Most of our bond issuances have been 12 years or less. which is a pretty aggressive schedule. That would leave about $1 million this fiscal year, and you'd be back up to a little over 2, between 2 and 3 the following year, with the thought that the First Street downtown streetscape project is a year out from design and probably another 1.5 years out from actually doing any work. I don't know what that's going to look like either, so I don't have a dollar amount for it, but as I did put in the memo, every time that we do this, every time that you borrow, keep in mind that that new pool gets pushed back a few more years. I do expect our debt capacity to increase, not necessarily to be celebrated, because a lot of people saw their individual values of their homes increase significantly over the course of the last year. That helps in this scenario. Our debt capacity will go up, but so we'll see an increase. But just know, I told Matt, who couldn't be here tonight,
Convenient.
I've told Matt, and I will tell you and tell the audience, without a major donor, I don't believe that the pool gets done while I'm still here. And I have a daughter that's in 6th grade, so I just don't foresee it happening. And I want everybody to understand that when we're making these decisions, that what we do here is definitely going to make it more complicated for future councils. Now, local option sales tax will be re-voted on in, I think, 2034, so there's opportunities there, but again, you are still looking at that 10-year magic window.
Again, I thought the memo was well written, the response to the question was well written. I don't think that, I wasn't surprised by anything in here. I don't know about, Stephanie or Deb or Mark Andreessen, who's coming on board here soon. But we were pretty much already prepped for this.
Yeah.
So thank you for your good work on that. And that was just informational, right? That's all this.
Yeah, as we inform, or as I inform the bond attorneys, the direction, I do need to know if you are comfortable moving the water meter project from SRF to GO. I need to direct council to do that. I need to work with Maggie on a much larger borrowing. I need to wait for Water's Edge to come back and tell us what that number is going to be at the pool. And the only thing that I would tell you as far as being put under the gun is that Water's Edge is coming back with obviously different options for you. You're going to have a shorter amount of time in which to pick those options. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe, Maggie, we were looking at April, May.
Correct. Yeah, we were thinking April, May, because what we'd like to do is make sure that you get any kind of reimbursement of anything that you spend to date. If you start the project and the bond work, let's say, is not done, which happens sometimes, you want to make sure that you're made whole by June 30th. And so we typically sell a lot of bonds in that April, May timeframe, so that you're closing just about 30 days after the bond sale, you're closing and getting those funds by June 30th. So our intent with the urban renewal work that has to be done will probably be sometime of April or May.
So
we just have to hit the ground running with the water,
Correct.
when Water's Edge gets back.
Yes.
To your point, Chris, if this were, speaking of the water meter project, if it were a less long-term or integral project, I would maybe be more comfortable leaving it in the SR funding and a looser sort of RFP. But when this is hopefully something you only do every several decades.
Yeah, I've,
Getting stuff that's been tested and we know is gonna let us down, I think is more important than whatever the minor increase in the cost might be.
I've had the fortunate privilege to take on garbage and water, which most city managers don't have to do in their entire career, and we're doing it in less than 5 years here. But,
Thank us
yes, when I think of the fact that we are putting the equipment in people's homes where there's potential for failure, I would prefer to go with companies that have years and years and years of service that I can fall back on to say, they've just gone through a transition in Solon, they've gone through a transition in Marion, the projects have rolled out quite well. And I have nothing against some of these other products, and they'll still be considered. I just want them to have to meet the same standards that the two more well-known companies are currently.
There's a lot of advantages on the water meter project. I'd really like to get that done, whether the RFP favors Neptune or the competition or whatever. I'd really like to get that off the table. One of the toughest discussions I've had at this table in my councilman days, and some of you may have already been on that discussion as well, is with a citizen that had an astronomical water bill, did not understand why, and took months to get it rectified. And our ordinance is that we give them 25% remediation, if I remember, and it took them months to figure out they were pumping water
Under a cistern.
into a cistern or someplace. It was, yeah.
$4,000.
Yeah, and that was tough to enforce. This, if we have 24-hour capability of recognizing that somebody's using the water, this was, another example is Lisbon just had the same thing, of a person who moved out of their home to a nursing home and just contesting their bill. That'd be a tougher conversation to have even yet, where literally a toilet was running and the resident moved out of the facility.
There's possibilities too that in those instances, we would be able to potentially shut meters off electronically, so that, if that were to happen after hours, it would be more of a go to the computer and flip a switch versus calling somebody in for 2 hours of overtime to come in and manually turn them on and off. But there's a lot of benefits. I still can't tell you where the water's going. Like, the meter's going to tell me that you're using more than you normally are, but I can't tell if it's going through the toilet or where it's going.
Are you
But
filling up your pool or is your
yeah,
toilet running? We
at
don't
least
have any idea,
we can ping it,
Right.
and it can alert, hey, for this entire week, you've used historically more water. Be looking, 25% of $100 extra in the water bill is a whole lot better than 25% of $4,000 in the monthly water bill. So,
The last system-wide, citywide change we made was with the garbage services a year and a half ago.
So we're due.
We're, that election, we got the political capital, right? Time to make another system-wide change. And
the other part of that, though, on a more serious note, is they will do, part of the project is to identify lead fittings when we go in and do these projects. So obviously with things that have happened in Michigan, lead and water pipes is a huge issue. So that's being tied into this project as well.
good, probably so. Chris, on the agenda, you have this as an action item. I know there's a lot of information here, but
It's an action item because I needed to see whether or not you were okay with trying to incorporate one large borrowing and moving from SRF, which the head nods would tell me that you are. The details of which will be coming over the course of the next few months, but staff will move forward with that direction.
Thank you,
Thanks, Maggie.
Chris, and thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Maggie. We've gone through all the pages of the borrowing note, I think. Positive, negative, staff recommendations. If we have, purposes to make a council action? Or is it
I
not-
don't necessarily need a motion, I just didn't want to put it as a discussion when I'm asking your opinion. The head nod is fine, you're not voting on anything tonight, I just, when we go to prep this, I just want to make sure that I'm either prepping for one or two, or which direction we're going.
Keep caught our direction. The prevailing wage, is that Davis-Bacon Act? Goes back to that.
Correct.
Exhausted, Jason? Seven? Okay. Moving to reports to be received. Vernon Police Department report. Vernon-Lisbon Police Department report. Any questions for Chief?
Well, either one of you add today's events.
We have to talk about it.
So Eldon decided to come to work today. And found that one of the new public works buildings had been broken into by a very small individual apparently, because he crawled through a very small window. And took our UTV, our 2022 John Deere Gator for a spin around Lynn County. We recovered it today in a ravine in Marion. So we spent most of our day trying to get that back and rolling from there. So I believe we are well versed to know who they are and bring the case to resolution and probably back to the court system and go through from there. But
So we obviously don't have cameras out there yet. We have a
we have
camera
the far west cameras.
down the road
Right.
where we drop off our refuse and stuff.
We are waiting for the panel.
And electricity and
For electricity.
Which just came in. It's like we just got the line on that.
Yep.
So we're getting there, but yeah, just, I mean, the whole scenario is kind of a fluke event. We will have cameras eventually.
If there was snow on the ground, you just follow the tracks.
they went wherever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a
Oh,
drive.
no kidding.
Gee.
We had to stop and get gas.
They used
was
it all.
about empty.
Is that the only reason they stopped, because they ran out of
And
gas?
we also just put together that it was noted that they were only going like 5 miles an hour in the city, avoiding the cops. Had they put the seatbelt on,
It would've
it
taken-
would have went like 55.
Oh, so it's got a regulator that unless you have a seatbelt on? Oh, that is fantastic. That's
It's just another example that thieves are rocket scientists.
Right.
Yes.
They're not ours, they're not our kids, not our kids.
I often say that we should write a book, but
I have this vision of a helicopter following away on a 7-lane highway.
You almost needed a helicopter to get it out of where it was today. So it
I
was,
guarantee they were trying to push their foot through the gas pedal to the floor, trying to figure out how to make this thing faster.
who buys this junk?
Driving for hours.
That was funny.
Well, Chief Shannon, I would like to be a fly on the wall when you tell that person that, if you had buckled that.
Yeah, or do we encourage that for next time? I don't know.
Probably not.
So that's how Monday started.
There we go.
Well, thank you for the report.
Public Works, Eldon, you've already made your contribution here with the Gator. I hope P&K checks it out and
Yep.
get made whole in this process eventually. Anything else, Eldon, other than you finished pouring Wednesday?
We're set up, yeah, we gotta set up a few things on that last pour. So we're scheduled, I have a will call ready mix for Wednesday, so we gotta get 4 drains set and steel tied and everything's pretty well graded already, but yeah, and then we'll have completed the entire floor in that building and we can start utilizing it for storage like it's supposed to be.
A lot of concrete.
Yeah, and I was gonna put kind of some numbers together to actually show you guys what we're saving by doing it ourselves, which is gonna be quite a bit. But I'll wait till I get the final invoice from the ready mix, but.
Just hauling all that rock.
Gator would come in handy for
Too soon.
Is it too soon?
Still hurts a little.
Matt's not here for his Parks and Rec report, but,
Yeah.
full library report, I think we got a meeting tomorrow, but, nothing new there. Any other discussion items, none at this point. I did ask, Chris to put on the agenda for the next meeting. I think he's going to move it to, kind of a rules, conduct as far as council members dealing with, public comment section, agenda items,
Yeah.
things like that, just as a reminder, see if we want to still continue with these and educate, bring Mark up to speed on it and so on, but that's a discussion item for next meeting probably. Mayor's report. Any council reports, committee reports?
We had, I thought, a very good meeting. Tom, myself, John Hart from Cornell College, Greg Batenhorst from the Community School District, and, really just opening up lines of communication and continuing to talk about some of the big issues that are facing us as a community, the three largest employers, and I'm glad to be part of that. So.
An action item that may come out of that is 2 to 3 months down the road, a joint school board and council meeting where information is shared on the child care issue, since those are the two parties that are involved with that. I invited school board to be here and we'd host, but they want to get a little farther on in their superintendent selection process, and but so that everybody's hearing the same information at the same time and asks the same questions and gets the same answers. Because there's a lot of different constituencies, a lot of different people. I've been volunteering for this for a little over a year now.
And doing a lot of really good work. And so trying to bring it all together is, I think, really important.
And then next steps. So that's probably 3 months out, yeah. Anything else, city administrator?
Did you want to talk about the MLK Day now or later, next
Um,
meeting? Because I'm not going to be at the next meeting, but Mark's here, but.
I just asked Chris about that Monday is a scheduled council meeting, and in the past, we've had council meetings on that, that second Monday. Is everybody okay with keeping that? Because we have a guest speaker from somewhere. I want to make sure I give it the right date.
I don't have a problem.
So go with that Monday, MLK Day. All right. Anything else needs to come before this open part of this meeting?
And then, are we having a closed?
I think I need to mention that, if there's nothing else on the open part of the
I
meeting.
just have one thing to
Yes,
say.
yes.
And that is, Deb's not here, but this is her last meeting. And she has given so much to this community at so many levels with the school board and now with the city council, and so.
And with the CDG.
yeah.
She did a ton of good work with the CDG.
So, deep bow to Deb Herman.
Well done.
I may invite her to come back at the next meeting, because twice she asked me the last 2 meetings. Should I bring it up now? Should I talk about it now? So when do you want? When do you want? When do you want to do it? It's up to you.
She has some parting comments, I think, that she wanted to make, and unfortunately, she had planned to make them tonight, so she'll definitely be welcome to
Certainly.
come at a future council meeting and just be from the audience.
Councilmember Emeritus.
Good.
Yeah, she was one of the spearheads on the LBC, that project for 20 years.
Yeah.
And LMI, the Housing Commission, for a long time. That's been a passion of hers, as well as CDG, big time there. Yeah. Any other reports that we need to talk about? Otherwise, I am going to pause on open meeting and go ask people to leave the room and then make a, I'm sorry, we need a motion to go into closed session. Do we do that now or whenever? Okay, let's have a motion to go.
You can make a motion and then allow for the
Okay.
room to clear.
Motion by Scott to go into closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all of that. So for the minutes, we've got a motion to go into closed session. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you in the new